While I Was Away by Waka T. Brown. This was the last middle grades novel that I read over the course of the summer. It was recommended to me, and I'm glad that I picked it up. Like the others that I read, this was also sort of a fish out of water story. A character that is put into a situation that they didn't expect to be put in, and they have to deal with it and sort of survive. But this one does it in a way different from the others that I've talked about so far. While I Was Away is a memoir, or a real-life story about the author's 5-month stay in Japan with her grandmother when she was 12 years old. Where the other books I read this summer were all realistic fiction or stories that could happen in real life, While I Was Away is nonfiction, and it follows what did happen in real life to the author, Waka T. Brown. So if you pick up this book by Waka T. Brown, you'll be learning about what it was like to be Waka T. Brown, learning to survive as a student with a confusing, difficult grandmother that she has to live with in 1980s Japan. I expect for a lot of middle grades readers and even a lot of adult ones, the setting I just described of 1980s Japan is probably a little bit out of the ordinary from what they're used to reading. It's a little bit different from the settings we usually get in middle grades novels. Every other middle grades novel I read this summer was at least mostly set in the United States and dealing with school there. But in While I Was Away, Waka has to deal with school in Japan, and it brings some challenges that are very different from some of the challenges these other characters that I talked about in other videos had to deal with. Let's go through the preview. When Waka's mother suspects her 12-year-old daughter can't understand basic Japanese, she makes a drastic decision to ship Waka to Tokyo to live with her strict grandmother and reconnect with the culture and master the language. Goodbye friends, end of 6th grade parties and fun, and goodbye summer vacation. Plucked from her straight-A student life in rural Kansas and sent halfway across the globe, where her reading levels are embarrassingly low, Waka embarks on what feels like the hardest 5 months of her life, learning an incredibly complicated writing system called kanji, dealing with the social politics of classmates who think she's illiterate, and attempting to understand her complicated obasama. Even though this is the country her parents come from, Waka has never felt more like an outsider. If she's always been the smart Japanese girl in America, but is now the dumb foreigner in Japan, where is home? And who will Waka be when she finds it? The main character of this book felt mostly comfortable at their school in Kansas, but when they have to go to Japan, this character finds that they're far behind, and that's mostly due to her lack of understanding of the Japanese language. Classmates that she meets, like real life, range from nice. She instantly has a whole lot of people being nice to her as soon as she shows up to class, but then also has classmates that are absolutely horrible, and classmates that are awkward, or classmates that are picking on her. The friend group and the dynamics and the drama that she has to navigate, I think, despite happening in a country that is going to be foreign for a lot of the readers of this, are going to instantly be recognizable and instantly applicable. If you're interested in Japanese culture or the language, there is a lot you can learn from this novel. There's a lot that I learned from it. Even with its setting being decades removed from the present, you're getting a whole lot of interesting information that's still applicable today. Waka the character and Waka the writer are both excellent at holding the reader's hand and explaining what's going on with unfamiliar things like types of food or cultural things in Japan or things like the language and writing, without making this whole book feel like a social studies lesson. It stays interesting while still having some great social studies type information in it. The complex, confusing, and frequently difficult relationship that Waka has with the grandmother character that refers to as Obasama throughout is really interesting. The author doesn't dumb anything down and expects you as the reader to be okay with things, to just let them come to you. It also kind of illustrates, maybe better than most things that I've read recently in the middle grades genre, that sometimes relationships are messy and they don't necessarily have clean or perfect endings that tie everything up. And I appreciate that the author is able to let that get across, because middle grades readers are definitely mature enough to understand that. Ultimately, you get a pretty amazing novel in this book. I think it does have pretty broad appeal. Walking in the author's shoes proves interesting, and I think most who read this book will agree with me. I'd highly recommend on this one having the audiobook version, as it does help with some of the difficult names and pronunciations of Japanese words you're going to get throughout. And it's just really well done, at least the audible version that I listened to. I recommend While I Was Away to people who are interested in Japan, especially the language and culture. You get a lot of interesting information about the country and the culture, and if that interests you in any way, this is a great book to read. If you are somebody who likes memoirs and nonfiction, this is a great example of it. If you're somebody who hasn't read many nonfiction memoirs, this is a really good entry point as well, regardless of what age or part of school you're at. If you like to read sort of like what if scenarios, or scenarios where you can imagine what it would be like to be somewhere else, this is a good book. It's really easy to get into the main character's shoes and think to yourself, what would it be like if I was, suddenly forced to go to Japan and live for months and try to learn the language and try to fit in? I would recommend this book to most people, but if you are somebody who does struggle getting interested in books that are set in places different from where you live, then this could be a little bit of a struggle, because it does take place in a place that may be very different from what you're used to, and some people struggle with that when reading. There's also one, criticism, but not necessarily, because I don't think every book needs it. There's not a lot of humor in this book, at least not a lot of humor that I picked up on personally. That's not to say that it's like joyless. There's a whole lot of bright moments and fun moments throughout, but like some memoirs, it is very cut and dry. It is telling you what's happening and how the person is dealing with it, and it's not necessarily using humor to draw you in. I didn't really think that was present a whole lot throughout the book. I really, really enjoyed While I Was Away. I would probably give it 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's an excellent book, and I do think it is a book that most people who pick it up are going to greatly enjoy. If you pick it up, please let me know what you think about it, and thanks for watching this preview of While I Was Away by Waka T. Brown.